Welcome, everyone, to our Zoom series on the proposed housing code updates related to the City of Yachats Title IX Land Use Code. Today, we are here to discuss city infrastructure, and joining us are the Public Works and Streets Committee Chair, Lynn West, and the City of Yachats Water and Wastewater Leads, Rick McClung and Dave Buckwald. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you have been along for the ride through this Zoom series so far, thank you for participating and for your engagement. Past Zoom series are available on our City of Yachats YouTube page. So for today's agenda, infrastructure is not necessarily a direct correspondence to this code, but clearly has an impact or will be impacted by any additional housing in Yachats. So it's definitely a critical part of the discussion. And what I'm going to do today is just start off highlighting some of the sentiments that were collected on the flip chart at the infrastructure station during our July 14th community engagement session. And then I'll invite Lynn, Rick, and Dave to talk about those. Of course, we have our city planner, Catherine Gunther, here as well, if something is a little bit more specific to her jumping in. So we've got our team here to discuss all things city infrastructure and planning. Um, After we go through some of the sentiments that were collected, we will open the virtual floor for people to ask questions and engage in some meaningful dialogue here. Just raise your hand. There's a virtual hand you can raise at the bottom of your screen, and I will call those in order as I see them as the conversation naturally flows. If there is no questions, we do have a list of questions that were collected during that July 14th event. I do ask that we remain respectful and stay specific topic. Or topic specific, sorry. I am going to go ahead with those sentiments. These are going to be ones that I'm sure are resonating with the thoughts that most people are having in their head. And one of the big questions that we're receiving is, will this affect our water, our city water? We do have low flow in the summer, and if we bring in additional housings, whether that be in ADUs, duplex, triplexes, what can we expect for our city infrastructure and water supply? Rick, that seems like a pretty
Hmm.
good topic for you to talk about.
Okay. Um, our window of drought is actually a pretty small window. It can happen in September and October. It rarely happens in August. What matters is if we have a really long Indian summer. And I don't think that having some ADUs, and I've seen there's a thought process that there could be up to 270 of them or something. Well, that's not going to happen overnight, and um, if at all. And what makes me, it's kind of a catch-22. It's our busiest time of the year. The hotels are full, and so if we have 2,000 people in town, 1,000 of them are tourists, and they don't care about drought. They don't care about the water situation at all. So to limit the growth of home owners or ADUs um, seems out of balance from the water department's point of view. But we don't have a shortage of water. We have connection with South Lincoln Water District for every part of the drought year. And we are looking forward to getting new water sources. Um, we are going to start reviewing what it would take to make a desalinization plant. And we need an additional source, even if the city didn't have one more person come in, we need to be looking for additional sources because we don't know what climate change is going to do. We talk about it, but there's no matrix for us to follow, no timeline. It's just every year we wonder if it's going to be a drought. This year, unless it gets really, really hot at the end of the year with east winds, we're not going to have a problem at all. And we have yet to use our connection with South Lincoln. Um, we've had an agreement of some sort for the last 20 years, but nothing as concrete as the agreement that we have now. And we've never had to use them. So for the security of Yachats, we will be looking for additional water sources to grow comfortably and secured into the future.
And you
Did I expect it?
mentioned des you mentioned desalinization, and that's a long range vision. You know, just the conversations are just starting, but that's the natural responsibility of the city is to be looking into the future. We don't really know what climate change will bring. You want to discuss a little bit more about the connection agreement we have with South Lincoln, when we've had to tap into
Yeah,
that, why we would have to tap into that?
yeah. So the agreement with South Lincoln gives us up to 100 gallons a minute or 1 million gallons a month, whichever one comes first. Uh, and that is 144,000 gallons a day, which is a lot more than we'll need. Our top peak flow during the summer is close to 250,000 gallons a day. Um, Even during a drought, we can make 300,000 gallons a day at the wastewater plant. And so if you add the 144,000, we're almost at 500,000 gallons a day of uh, possibility of water to be used, which is huge for Yachats. I mean, that's a good 20 years, 30 years of security there. But we don't know, like I mentioned, climate change. We don't know what's going to happen. So in a long time from now, maybe South Lincoln can't give us water. But I believe that we have at least 20 years before we have to decide a new agreement with South Lincoln. And in that 20 years, we need to be looking for our additional water source. So the city is using South Lincoln as a bridge for our future. So we're doing really good. We've had a lot of thoughtful thinking. Um, Council's been working hard on this for decades, actually. And so it's not like we're walking into this blind. We're walking into it with our eyes wide open.
And do you want to talk a little bit about what desalinization is?
Yeah, um, that's taking seawater and making it drinking water by running it through a high pressure filter system. But what we're going to be looking at is the hybrid system. We have a point of diversion right in front of the water plant that we have always thought to be useless because it gets brackish. And our current water plant doesn't treat brackish water. Dexter, can you mute yourself?
Can can we get Dexter Watts to mute themselves, please? Maybe Neil, can you maybe remove them maybe because it doesn't seem like they're being able to mute. Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry
that's
for the
all
interruption. Go for it.
right. Okay, now where was that?
You were talking about the hybrid, what
Okay, the
desalinization is
hybrid.
and a
Thank you.
hybrid. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So the um the water in front of the water the Yahats River in front of the water plant does get brackish um, during the late summers when the flows of the river get low. The tide comes in a little bit and it mixes. So it will be a very low salt water in, to draw from there, but it would take a desalinization plant to process it. But also at the same time, the price of that desalinization plant is a fraction of what it would be if it was 100% sealing. So, and also taking it right there in front of the water plant is an amazingly, for desalinization, an amazingly economical um, option. Once we find out the cost of a plant, what I'm saying is economical is it's right there in front of the water plant. The infrastructure needed behind it to get the water to the water plant, and then from um, the desalinization water into our system was the majority of the cost of using the Yahats River in the past. We have a second, we only have two, but we got a second point of diversion that we've always been looking at, and it's about 3 or 4 miles up the river, and it would require 2 miles of pipe to hook into our current piping from Reedy Creek. And I haven't ran the numbers on what that would cost, but $200 a foot is the going price for something like that. So it's an astronomical cost. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. It's actually kind of exciting to be thinking about a hybrid desalinization plant. We'd be the only ones on the coast that have one. But one of the obstacles that we can do that makes it so much easier is we already have a point of diversion. It's there. It's meant to be used, and we don't have to fight the DEQ, the red tape of saying like, where would we put this on along the coastline? Where would we draw from? That's an obstacle that's just huge, and so it's already like it was meant to be to just put in a little desalinization plant right at where the water plant's at. And also, the way we've been strategically buying property, um, the property right next door to the water plant we have purchased, and it has some property on it that's well out of the tsunami zone. So it would allow us to build a plant out of the tsunami zone and with a minimal infrastructure cost. So, and how to pay for that, um, I mentioned on a couple different types of projects, we have to get on the grant train, and that's why we got to start now. And you think, oh, we got 20 years, yeah, get on the grant train, and that's not very long. And so one grant leads like one for discovery, another grant for um, studies and whatever the state comes up with. And then, when you finally get to the construction grant, you've probably gone through 3 or 4 other grants to get there. So that's the grant train. And um, it isn't our only way to do it. We could get forgiveness loans, 2 to 3% loans, but I'd much rather take the grant train as the first option to see where it leads us.
Slow and steady, long range thinking. So I'm going to
Yeah.
hop us over to a wastewater question. Um, one of the comments that was gathered from the station was, what about our wastewater system? Can it handle future build outs?
In short, yes.
Okay, tell us about
I'll
that, Dave.
expand a little bit.
Let's elaborate.
Yes. So in 2009, we upgraded the wastewater plant and four of the satellite pump stations. Yeah, four of them. Uh, and with that being said, the plant was built to be able to handle, like they were shooting for the 20-year stuff, but I really think it was more of a 50-year plan. When this plant came online, I'll throw some technical facts out there, is that our BODs and stuff, the pounds coming in of waste equated somewhere between 250 to 400 pounds a day. And this plant can handle quite a bit more than that. We can handle 6, 7, 800 pounds a day coming in. It's kind of built also on flows. This plant is built to withstand daily maximum flows of 1.94 million gallons a day. Currently, during the summertime, which is always the low period of flows for the wastewater systems, we're running right about 150,000 gallons a day. And if you kind of take that and correlate that with water, that means probably the water plant's producing 150, 160 thousand gallons a day to be used. So, um, the water plant's not working a whole lot right now. They're keeping their reservoirs full, and we're keeping our tanks full here. So that's for that. If we look out 20 years from now, shoot, I think in our master plan they estimate anywhere from 1,700 to 2,800 population growth in 2020 or 2041. uh, Even then, that you calculate the numbers on it, we should, if this plant is still holding steady, with it barring any major earthquakes or anything like that, this plant will be rocking and rolling just with the two basins we have online. Right now, currently, this plant struggles to run two basins during the summer. We try different methods to do it. And the only reason I say that is because the flow is so low. We've got 446,000 gallons of processing wastewater capacity right here in static form, and we're having to feed it with 150,000 gallons a day. So we generally will switch it down. The operators and myself will make a decision. We'll take one basin down and just operate it off of that. So, yeah, this plant's well to go for the next 20 to 30 years, I would say, in a nutshell.
And the plant's not the only part of the wastewater system.
Okay, yeah,
Let's talk
okay.
about the pipes
We'll
that go
talk
from the
about the
houses
pipes.
to the plant.
Yeah, so in 1972 or so, the new sewer system got installed. That's AC pipe, asbestos cement pipe. Um, it's holding pretty good, but it's also 50 some odd years old now. We have a section on Third Street that's got to get replaced, but that's probably due to excessive wear since it comes from or it's fed by not only a couple sections of town, but it's also fed by a force main. And anytime gravel and stuff gets in there, that kind of eats it away. But the system, we have 13, I think it's 13.6 miles of sewer pipe in town. And all of that's fairly old, but not all of it, not completely. There's quite a bit of PVC in there, which is newer, came in the late 80s and 90s and so on. It's fairly decent, and there will be times that we have to replace some of it, but that's just due to common wear. Believe it or not, there's not a lot of abrasive in sewer pipe that comes down there. The only abrasive material is generally rock and gravel from when other utilities bore through our system and rock and gravel get in there and so on. Other than that, the stuff that's transported by the wastewater system is not abrasive and so on. The other thing is, we'll get a little more technical, hydrogen sulfides, but we don't have any real dead areas where wastewater just sits and produces hydrogen sulfide and the acid eats away of the pipe. That's not an issue for the city of Yachats. Um, 13 miles, something gets flushed down south of town. It doesn't take long for it to hit the plant in just a matter of maybe a couple hours, if that, and so on. But the pipe itself, it's still pretty stable. Our master plans state where we should be doing our work on the pipes, and some of that is due to pipe that's becoming undersized, but that's also because we've had I&I issues. So these pipes and the plant, everything's designed to last for at least 20 years. So now they're already in there for 50. The pipes they're working really well still. But in areas that are overwhelmed in the wintertime, that's where we see that there's needed repairs that need to be done, or pipes are assessed for surcharging and so on if they're backing up. And technically, in the wintertime, we really only get 150,000 gallons of wastewater. The rest of it is all groundwater that's coming into the system and so on. Uh, yeah, so pretty much that. The system is a fairly robust system and it's still good. We've got plenty of years left in it. Probably the next, I would almost venture to say maybe in 30 years there'll be something to look at, but not because of
Thanks,
any
Dave.
increase of growth.
So this next section, I think it'd be good for you, Lynn, is our emergency preparedness committee. Take you out of the public works and streets a minute, but for emergency, there's a question here about will we have enough emergency supplies to equal the amount of people that could come with a code edition?
Hmm. It's a good question. How many people will that be? Um, what we're
Hard to
trying to
say.
do is to prepare as much as possible. We've expanded the initial two connexes to four, and we're looking at a fifth uh, yet this summer, and providing more and more supplies in each one, updating supplies, making sure we have means of sterilizing water, uh, means of getting into areas where there has been devastation and picking up items and learning how to deal with what we're going to have to work with, depending on the type of an emergency, whether it be fire, tsunami, landslide, flooding. That's the unknown, and how do we prepare for that? All we can try to do is kind of prepare for everything. And that's what we're doing at this point, just trying to spread out our resources, and hopefully we will have adequate means of communication and supplies to work with.
So, our emergency preparedness efforts have been great for the city, and thank you, Lynn, for really leading the charge on that. But we have a number of connexes throughout the city and are working on, we just got an additional one up on Horizon Hill. While we are preparing for these connexes as well as the commons as an evacuation site, it's it's also important for residents to be able to prepare themselves, also not fully rely on the city for emergency preparedness. Can you talk a little bit about the 2 weeks ready program and maybe
Absolutely.
do a little plug for your emergency preparedness fair?
Sure. It is, and in the past, we have tried to help educate the community in providing little articles in the newsletter. In the past, there have been emergency preparedness fairs, and there are in adjacent communities, and we try to let people know when those occur. In September or October 3rd, we're going to have a 2 week ready fair. In the past, we've focused on what you need to do when there's an event. You grab your go bag and leave, and what would go in that go bag. This time we're focusing on that 2 weeks after that first 72-hour period. What should you have in that 2 weeks? What should you prepare to have for that 2 weeks? We have several state agencies that will be representing each of the 8 steps that have been identified for 2 week ready. They're going to have a table, and we'll be there to primarily educate, talk about what that means to get that area ready, food preparation, shelter preparation, water preparation. Each of those need to be focused on separately for your 2 week preparation. And I think there's going to be a lot of things for a lot of the community to learn that I know a lot of people just kind of assume they are ready. I'm not sure that they are. Um, as we investigate more, we find more information about things we hadn't thought about. And I think that's going to come out in the 2 week ready fair, October 3rd.
Yeah. And then Dave, Rick, and Lynn, maybe even Catherine a little bit on this one. Can you talk a little bit about the effective on our systems with infill versus sprawl? So if people add an ADU or an internal conversion, detached ADU, creating their home into a duplex, building a duplex on their property, can you talk a little bit about how that works with our system and if it is better or worse or how whatever your answers are there?
I'll start. Um, our water lines will definitely handle more water going through them because they're set up for fire protection also. So if you've got a water line out in front of your house, somewhere it's going to be feeding the hydrant. Um, so the extra flow from a few more houses um, wouldn't matter at all. So that's the water side.
I I'll say
Dave?
something real quick on the inverse of that. On the backside of that statement, the extra flow to the wastewater plant in the summertime will help. It makes things works better. Makes things work better.
More flow,
More
smoother
flow
flow.
helps in the summer. Yes.
Okay.
I talked a little bit with Dave because I was curious if someone were to build an ADU in the back of their existing home, did they have to put a whole new service in? And apparently, you may or may not choose to do that, but you could actually tap off of your existing home to build to and attach to that ADU. So it would not mean necessarily, I mean, that's your choice, depending on how you're setting up your ADU. Um, so at least you have options.
Hmm.
Okay, well, we are at about 3:30. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. We've been doing a very good job of keeping these just right at 1 hour and being very respectful of everybody's time. So I do want to open the floor to questions. If we see a raise of hands, I'll call on you as I see your hand pop up. In the meantime, while we're waiting for hands, maybe you could talk a little bit more about SDCs. And if somebody was to add an ADU to their property, a detached ADU, we'll go with a detached, what would that look like for them? What would their process be?
For
And
STCs,
go for it, Dave or Rick or Lynn. Yeah, STCs. Like
we
what does
haven't
that what would their steps be? And then
we haven't addressed that yet. And the impervious surface area could um, Catherine probably knows more about this than me, but there's a formula for impervious area. You're granted so many feet as a standard minimum, and if you go past that, your stormwater SDC goes up. And one thing I haven't mentioned any meetings or to anybody really, is the thought process of serving another house. An ADU, in my mind, is another resident. South Lincoln County charges an extra meter base. If you've got two homes on your one meter service, you get charged two bases. So you don't have to put in a separate service if you don't want to and pay the SDCs for a separate service. But it will something I'll bring up through the process. I'll start with public works and streets. And if it doesn't get any traction, well, we drop that idea. But it's something that I do plan on bringing up in the future if all this passes.
If I can just jump in real quick, I'm not sure everybody knows what an SDC is. So, system development charge, which is the fee that we charge for the privilege of hooking up to water, sewer, or storm drain. So it doesn't really buy you anything tangible, but goes into supporting our current operations. So right now we have one flat fee. Uh, every new home that's built in the city pays the same amount. Other cities have tiered systems where it's based on square footage. So a larger home would pay more than a smaller home. And as far as how it works for ADUs across the state, it's all over the place. Some communities charge nothing, some use the tiered system, some approach it differently if it's an internal conversion. So basically, I was taking a part of my home, converting it to an apartment, but no exterior modifications to the house. It might be different than if it's a detached ADU, a little cottage in the backyard or something. Sorry, guys, we use some
Okay, we've got,
terminology that I find other people don't always use.
thank you for that, Catherine. We do have a hand up from Lauren. Go ahead, Lauren.
Believe it or not, I keep trying to hold back in order to give other people a chance to ask questions, but when I'm not seeing hands raised, I'm raising mine. So, Catherine, so true. It's very helpful to have that defined, what an SDC is. And Lynn and Rick and Dave, very helpful to hear all your knowledge and information and the current situation. So, thanks. This is an area that really I don't know anything about. So, what I have are worries, basically, worries to bring. And I hope to share them with you in the hope that you can speak to them in such a way that I can get better night's sleep than I currently am. That you can help me understand why I shouldn't be worrying in the ways that I am. So, I think several of you have already mentioned climate change. And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that it's happening quicker than it had been modeled to happen, and it's happening more intensely than it had been modeled. So that gives me cause for concern, and I wonder how that's being factored into the thinking, hopefully the studies that you're doing. I'd love to see studies that show how you're imagining what the water usage and how the facilities will be able to handle that water usage are over the next 20 years. But beyond that, obviously drought's a possibility, and it seems like we have increasing tourism, and if we increase the density of buildings, probably some of those will be hosting more tourists, therefore even increasing the water usage, and then increased population. So all these things that look like more water, more water, more water being needed. And I doubt that AI data center demands on water and what their impact has been and could be. I don't know if that's even been factored into like all the climate change models because it seems like a relatively recent phenomenon, but it worries me. I just saw that in Salem, the mayor said that public land couldn't be used to build a data center. So yay, but also whoa, it could happen certainly nearby or within the state, and I don't know how that would influence things. And then along with those worries, I'll keep going. In I guess it was July newsletter, our mayor raised the alarm in the opening pages around a potential water shortage in Yachats, given the possible passage of the bill that would allow for logging that could really dry up our water source. So I think it's going to be clear whether that bill will be passed or not by January, and it feels frightening to me to set ourselves up for a situation where we think there's water, but we don't actually know if that's going to affect our water supply. And then, in terms of the desalinization plant, again, this is not my realm, the technological realm, but I hear a lot of people saying we're going to, manage to get ourselves out of climate change because some kind of technology is going to be built and it'll take care of it. And well, so far it seems like technology such as AI is making things worse. And when I hear a desalinization plant brought up, I know there's two ways to deal with it, with the wastewater that comes from that. One is to dump it back into the ocean, which polluting the ocean doesn't seem like a really great choice. And the other is to frack, basically. It's to, push it way down underneath basalt rocks. And there's two problems that are showing up with that in other places that have never ever had earthquakes before fracking and are now having earthquakes. And most recently, the water that was put down under rock has started to seep out and is becoming a danger to contaminate water supply. And that water was supposed to stay down there forever, so to speak. So these are some of the worries that I have. And, Rick, I heard you say, I believe we have at least 20 years. And I'm wondering, is there data that you have that would help me understand, what causes you to have that belief? So in general, I'd love to see data that supports the sense that we can have a sustainable water life over time. And these are all my worries, and I hope you can address at least some of them.
Okay, I'll start with the first one, um, climate change. And so when you're listening about climate change, you have to remember where you live. If we listen to the news from the valley, their droughts are different than ours. They have a snowpack. We don't have a snowpack. And what La Nina or El Nino does is oftentimes keeps it too warm during the winter for the snowpack to develop. And so therefore, when spring comes, there's really no snow melt. And so you fall into a pretty bad drought. The valley dries up and it burns. and but we don't have that problem. We don't have a snowpack. What we have is aquifers from underground water that springs out of the sides of the mountain. And you can think of these as great big upside down swimming pools. Every year they top off, and as the summer goes on, the top of the hill gets drier and drier. And as you go down um, into late, early fall, there's still water coming out of the bottoms of these mountains. And so um, we have a complete different scenario. And to find information in our micro climate here, it is hard. But we did have a guy from OSU come out and do a study, and I'm happy to share that with you. It's what I've been basing a lot of my climate change talk with, is because it's the only report I've ever come across that talks about our local area. And so when I say 20 years, I'm drawing it from that report on the percentages of their best guesses, but they don't know, but their best guesses of what's going to happen. And so it's nothing it's not going to be a 10% a year type thing. It's going to be a 1% every couple years. And by the time you get, 20 years down the line, you may have a 10 to 15% um, difference. And with the technology portion and where to put the waste and all these other concerns, um, you got to remember the desalinization plant will be supplemental. We're still going to run the water plant, but if we need a couple extra gallons a minute, we'll fire up that um, desalinization plant. And when it comes to the waste, hey, that's something we're going to work out. I'm not going to tell you I know what's going on with that because I don't. But I don't think it's a reason to not move forward and learn this stuff and go into desalinization with all of our ducks in a row. It may be something really simple. I mean, if we're only running that thing a couple hours a day for uh, 21 days, there's not going to be a lot to deal with. It may even be one of those situations where you can put it out into a pond, a man built pond next to the plant, and you let that dry out and you scrape it out with a little backhoe. And so there's a lot of options with that. Let's see. What was another one of your concerns? I'm happy to talk about it.
Well, and
I,
maybe, oh, sorry, Lauren, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think we lost Bobby, so I'm gonna, even though hostessing skills are not my forte, I'm gonna try and jump in a little bit here. I know she's off in a kind of remote spot, so I've been struggling to hang in there.
I'm seeing her little box. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm texting a little too, though, that
Okay.
so I
Yeah,
guess
I don't see it.
internet connection. I just readmitted her, but the connection's been a little unstable. One of the things that she was hoping to we could touch on, we forget that Public Works also deals with our roads. So we're getting a lot of questions and concerns about traffic, lack of on-street parking or sidewalks here. Um, and maybe one of you could hit on that. And then I see Nicole has a question.
Well, I seen that might be a question, and I was hoping, outside of putting up signs and keeping the sides of the road clean, we don't create code. We have a code enforcer. So how that moves into the future is Public Works doesn't decide that. We just make it happen. So I don't know what you had to say, Catherine, but I really don't have a lot.
Well, that's a good point. I guess maybe that is the point. When we talk about parking requirements for our in our current code or in anything proposed, we are talking about off-street parking requirements. So spaces that are not in the city right away. Some confusion about that, but we have very few neighborhoods where we have on-street parking available. Um, and I guess you're right that that's not something, unless there's pressure to make that a priority, that won't likely change. The city isn't necessarily running around looking to develop more on-street parking unless it's felt that there's a need. Whenever I mention, though, to people that that could be an option, the idea of giving up that grassy swale in the front yard or places they've been landscaping immediately sends alarm through the room. So um, maybe there's not a whole lot to talk about there. That this point we've chosen not to improve the 50-foot right-of-ways that we have all over town. I don't think people realize most of our city streets are 50 feet wide. It's just the improvement, the pavement is much narrower, but there is room there to grow if that became a priority in the city. Um, Nicole,
To
did
go
you
ahead
want
with
to?
Nicole? Yeah.
Thank you, Bobby. Welcome back. I missed you.
You're doing a great job, Catherine.
Well, happy Friday, everyone. It's beautiful here in Yachats, and I appreciate you guys, popping on to address the concerns that the community has. Um, my question is about the parking. I'm curious, how many streets do you think Catherine may, or Rick might, I don't know who would be best be able to answer this, but how many streets are capable of on-street parking here in Yachats? And then I have a follow-up to that.
Catherine, I'd like to start with one little tidbit, and then you can definitely take over. Uh, let's take Second Street, West Second Street, for instance. Um, you think, God, there's not a lot of room there. I mean, if parking on both sides and two-way traffic. Well, one thing that's deceptive about that is our road right of way is only taking up a little bit of our right of way. A lot of these houses, the road right of way almost comes up to their front porch. And and so, you know, if we wanted to, we can make on-street parking, but that's a call that'll be a project that Public Works does once they're told to do it. Okay, Catherine.
Yeah, and I guess that's exactly the point I was trying to make. Neil just threw a map up there that um, well, Neil, maybe the Aqua Vista neighborhood would be a good one to demonstrate. I was just talking with folks there earlier this morning. So there is space within that 50-foot city right away to do on-street parking spaces, to do sidewalks, things like that. Um, but that means then that some of that green space that people tend to think of as their front yard disappears. And I think what Neil's trying to show you on this one here, I don't know if you can see that lighter white line, that is actually the property line. And then you see all that green between that and the pavement. That's within the city-owned right-of-way. So that is available for widening streets, for adding on-street parking or sidewalks. That just has not been something that I think the city has heard there's a whole lot of call for. And in some areas, now I'm thinking of King Street. Uh, King Street is barely one car width in pavement, but again, a 50-foot right of way in a lot of places. It's narrower in some spots. The terrain doesn't really lend itself so much to on-street parking there. So some neighborhoods is more difficult than others, but um, there the possibility is there.
Okay, my follow-up to that would be as we're looking at this density, is some of this off-street parking going to be considered, say, in like R1 zoning? For example, I live on Horizon Hill, and if FedEx is coming up and someone's coming to, it can be, quite, harrowing sometimes around some of our corners. So I think about um, neighbors when they have guests and parking on the street, and I've, having to navigate someone coming up and someone coming down, let alone if there's an emergency. So my follow-up would be, as part of these conversations that are being had about increasing density and changing parking regulations, are we going to look at those streets that are capable of the city making off-street parking as part of that comprehensively? Does that make sense?
I think so. Right now, all of the parking requirements that we're talking about are required to be off street, so outside of that city right away. So if we say you need 3 parking spaces for this particular unit, that means 3 completely outside of the city right away. So that's one part of it. Then the other part is enforcement. And I think, Nicole, you and I have talked about this issue in your neighborhood, even, with a vacation rental or other properties, we can say you have to build these parking spaces. That part's pretty easy, but then we can't be there watching to make sure people always use them, right?
Right.
So
And
there's the
and that's
enforcement side of it as well.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you brought that up because it creates, and I've heard this in other meetings and from other residents, it creates kind of like an uncomfortable cop calling on your neighbor. And that doesn't feel great, right? You always want to handle things directly with your neighbors and not have to report someone is doing something and to be that person. So it would just be, yeah, I think when possible, when we're looking at this density and creating, duplexes where a single dwelling stood, or adding ADUs, I think parking is going to be essential component that needs to be considered, especially because we are a car city. There's, a lot of us walk here in town, but we need to, get in the car to go to the doctor or to do, a lot of
Well,
things.
yeah, the bank. No,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, the bank. We could
don't
name
have
all
to
the
think
things.
too hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, like, well, in early version of this draft language, one thing that was in there for ADUs in particular was possibility of an on-street parking credit in certain situations. And I looked at that and I just, um, it's completely not. So that's kind of that's going away there. I don't see how we could enforce that. Uh, that just doesn't work here. Maybe it would in Portland metro area or something. So at this point, again, all the parking standards that we're talking about, those requirements need to be met outside of that right of way. It doesn't mean that you're not, you get a really popular person who has a lot of friends, and maybe you're going to see an uptick in people parking in the neighborhood. So that's the enforcement side of it, or the just how you deal with uh, more traffic in the neighborhood. The required off-street parking, though, there are very few changes even being proposed. So we're not talking about drastic reductions in off-street parking requirements. I think that's something you'll hear a whole lot of conversation about during both the Planning Commission and the City Council deliberations. Um, so I don't know that at least in the standards that we're going to see much of a reduction in parking requirements. I hope that helps. It doesn't really solve the enforcement side of the problem, but um, hopefully it will ease some people's fears, at least on we're not setting it up so that people have no option but to park on the street. That's not happening.
Thank you, Catherine.
You
Okay,
bet.
we're at 3:51, so we have time for another question. Um, Anybody else want to pop in there? Okay, we've got Lauren. Go
So
ahead,
I
Lauren.
was just hoping that, the question about this logging bill, I mean, I don't think it's being called a logging bill passage. I could get the reference, but hopefully you all know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That the mayor,
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah.
I can answer that. Um, we have two watersheds that we're concerned about. The Reedy Creek watershed and the Salmon Creek watershed. The Reedy Creek watershed is 100% Forest Service land. Salmon Creek is about 90% Forest Service land with one owner of two parcels right above the water plant. Um, he did log that several years ago, like 15 years ago, and it caused a lot of problems in our watershed. Actually made it kind of hard to use. So right now, the city is currently trying to buy that piece of property with help from the state, and Neil is definitely heading that one up. And if we can buy that, we can preserve that, and then 100% of our Salmon Creek watershed would be safe. So that takes us, unless the Forest Service starts selling logs, and from what I also understand with that logging act, the trees that we have in Forest Service land are pretty much too big for most of the mills that cut trees because of the rotating harvest method. Um, the tree size that the mills accept anymore are small, so they'd have to retool to even use the bigger trees. But I just don't see that land being part of our problem.
And Neil, do you want to
Is that
pop in and talk a little bit about what we're doing with the water source protection and DEQ grants?
Yeah, so if you can see on the map here, we have two main sources of water, the Salmon Creek watershed and the Reedy Creek watershed. And as Rick mentioned, there's two parcels that are privately owned in the Salmon Creek watershed. DEQ, in combination with Business Oregon, they made some grant funding available for doing studies on land to protect the watershed. And We haven't gotten the signed contract yet, but we've been told that we're going to get that grant money, 70,000 for studies on the land in Salmon Creek watershed. And if we do these studies and appraisals, timber evaluation and so forth, then it makes us eligible for grant funding for the actual property purchase itself. So if we can purchase that land and then do a forest stewardship plan, we can improve the land so that the water is retained in the soil if there's more vegetation and more trees. So we want to improve on it from the clear cut that happened a number of years ago.
I appreciate what everyone said, and that's some hopeful stuff. And it's great that you're getting the grant, and I look forward to study. And I guess, I've been advocating for a step-by-step approach to the code, not doing everything all at once. And this kind of further makes me feel that way. Let's see if we get the land so that we know it can't be logged and the water source can't be messed up. For instance, let's figure out how you use a desalination plant without creating pollution or potentially water you can't find a place to put that isn't going to become problematic over time. That's a long range plan. Maybe we can't wait that long, but still, step by step with the housing code, that is certainly what I'm hoping for. And thanks everyone for your work and for your knowledge and for taking this time.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're getting to 3:56 here. Do we have anybody that hasn't had the opportunity to ask a question that wants to get one more in? Okay. Rick, Dave, Lynn, Catherine, do you have any last minute things you'd like to say?
Maybe just a quick plug for next week's events. What do we have coming up next Thursday and Friday?
Yes, next week we do have two sessions again on Thursday and Friday at 3 p.m. On Thursday, we'll be talking about our design standards that are being proposed as part of this code addition or upgrade, and setbacks and height restrictions. Then on Friday, August 7th, we are going to dive into accessory dwelling units, ADUs, the guidelines that we're looking at, sizing, occupancy requirements, and all things ADUs on Friday, August 7th. And just a kind of follow up from yesterday's Zoom. We were talking about how long we've been working on this, and I did also say we just got started with this, and both can be true. We have been doing studies for many years on this, but we did also just start with getting it in our hands. The code process or code section of this, and really getting our planning commission familiar with it, and taking it from the consultant and now making it Yahat specific. And I do really want to make sure that you all know that we appreciate your participation, and we are hearing you, we're listening to you, your commissioners are listening to you, they are your neighbors, they're your friends. They also care about the community, and we all together want the best thing for Yachats. And there's not a single person involved in this that has any ill intention. And we just really appreciate everybody coming together to do the best for Yachats. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Neil, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. Friday, everyone.